Welcome to our second half of the discussion here, where we are going to spend a little less time than we did with James, but address Dewey and his notion of pragmatism and his contributions to this system of thought. John Dewey lived from 1859 to 1952. He's known for his philosophy as well as his educational theories and, of course, his influence within the realm of pragmatism. He's one of the main leaders to design a early 20th century progressive education in trying to help understand the best way to get people to think. And he changed and transformed much of the educational system, including impacted the one that you had up until this point in your life. His major writings are Quest for Certainty, How We Think, Human Nature and Conduct, as well as many others. He was born in Burlington, Vermont. His father was a grocer, and he'll get his PhD in philosophy from Johns Hopkins University in 1884. It was here that he encountered the notions of pragmatism and studied with Peirce. Some have even called him the most influential American philosopher in the first half of the 20th century. That's, of course, up for debate depending on who you like, but he's in that running and in that discussion. He was married, had children, and was a professor all over the United States and the world, including spending time at the University of Michigan, Minnesota, Chicago, Columbia, and lecturing at the Imperial University in Tokyo, Japan, and other national universities in Peking and Nanking, China, Turkey, Mexico, and even Soviet Russia. He was a member of the International Commission of the Inquiry into the Death of Leon Trotsky, where a not guilty verdict in 1937 was given in Mexico City. He died at the age of 92, so definitely on the older end of many of these philosophers we've addressed. His primary influence, where you see it, is really in education reform. Here, there was a large emphasis in developing the social sciences, especially things like sociology and social psychology. Math and languages also had less of an impact as a result of him. Instead of learning 30 different languages and doing advanced mathematics, it was much more, how is it that people work and think? And really his idea was that education should stress problem solving, and this should include experience. If any of you have been on field trips ever in your life, Dewey was one of the people who advocated for more of those, and so at least that part of the impact you saw in your own life. Dewey's understanding of pragmatism is one that he learned directly from Peirce, and for him, pragmatism and all sorts of learning is about a connection to experiences and a verification process of those experiences. What is it you've learned, and what is it you can do going forward off of that? And can you verify that your experiences are real and practical? In many ways, his basic philosophical aim follows Marx's thesis on Feuerbach that the aim of philosophy should not be simply to understand the world, but to change it. It's all about practical import. It's about what you are going to do with it. And pragmatism is the same way. Not just what difference does it make, but what are you going to do with that difference? And do your experiences help you differentiate one experience and another? In your assigned readings, the chapter is addressing what is thought, and we can see a very strong connection here with the notions of Peirce. The aim is to try to find a single, consistent meaning for the ideas of thinking and thought. He says, everything that comes to mind that goes through our heads is called a thought. Generally speaking, this is what most of us would say. Or, right, what's a thought? It's just something that bounced in your head. Maybe it was put there by somebody else, maybe it wasn't, maybe it's just a random shower thought, right? An idea that comes while you're relaxing in the shower and, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. You solved the problem, or you're studying on something to try to get it right. But generally speaking, broadly, the idea of a thought is anything that bounces in your head. As such, in the loosest sense, thinking signifies everything that, as we say, is in our heads or that goes through our minds. In this sense, Dewey says, silly folk and dullards think. Reflection involves not simply a sequence of ideas, but also a consequence. So we see there's a difference between just a thought, which any dullard can have, any idiot, any moron, and, of course, reflection that has a consequence, that you're going somewhere. It's not something that flutters in and out, but requires time and attention. Continuing, he says, in this next sense, thought denotes belief resting upon some basis that is real or supposed knowledge, going beyond what is directly present. So real thought, not just a thought, is something that is much closer to the idea of reflection. Right? It's going beyond what is present at this way. It is marked by acceptance or rejection of something as reasonably probable or improbable. So broadly speaking, everyone thinks everything that you think is a thought. But really what he's saying, when we're saying thought, we're connecting notions of consequence, of thinking, of going beyond something and accepting a proposition or rejecting it, of saying something is probable or improbable. And in some ways, this is a difference between thoughts and beliefs. Thoughts that result in belief have an importance attached to them, which leads to reflective thought, to conscious inquiry into the nature, conditions, and bearings of that belief. If you actually believe something, you've reflected and you've made an assent to take an idea. To think of whales and camels in the clouds is to entertain ourselves with fancies that are really just terminated with our pleasures. Oh, it kind of feels like this. Oh, it kind of looks like that. Okay, no big deal. They don't really lead to any particular belief. But to think that the world is flat is to ascribe a quality to a real thing, as it is a real property. The difference in you holding both of these propositions is that one will expect you to operate and think and construct your worldview differently. Staring off at the clouds is not going to have any lasting impact. Believing that the world is flat is probably going to change how you plan on traveling in the future or something, right? This conclusion denotes a connection amongst the things, hence is not, like unimaginative thought, plastic to our own mood. This is going to be something that you hold firm and is going to shape other thoughts as opposed to just changing depending on how you feel. Active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that it supported, and further conclusions to which it tends, constitute reflexive thought. Reflective thought is what we're looking for. It's active, persistent, and shapes other beliefs based off of these ideas in themselves. There are, however, Dewey continues, no sharp lines of demarcation between the various operations just outlined. Right? We don't have a very clear, I'm moving from just, random thoughts and staring at the clouds to holding notions of belief, or even those ideas in between where you've got a consequence of what does it mean if I hold this, or now that I hold this, what does that mean beyond that? What does my belief then imply, right? These are kind of wishy-washy, loose categories. So what do we do with that? He says the problem of attaining correct habits of reflection would be much easier than it is did not the different modes of thinking blend insensibly into another. Right? Because they all flow in together, it's hard to identify what is what. A man walking on a warm day, he says, the sky was clear the last time he observed, but presently he notes, while occupied primarily with other things, that the air has cooled. It occurs to him that it is probably going to rain. Looking up, he sees a dark cloud between him and the sun, and then he quickens his steps. What, if anything, in such a situation can be called a thought? You've all probably had this happen in your own life. You're out walking somewhere, and all of a sudden you go, the smell, the light, the temperature, something comes into your senses, and you go, I think it's going to rain, and you start making actions as a result of that. So where is there a thought? Does it matter if you're conscious of it or not? Really, where is the thought to be found amongst this? You're engaging in action, you're perceiving reality, but are you thinking? Neither the act of walking nor the noting of the cold is a thought, according to Dewey. Walking is one direction of activity. Looking and noting are other modes of activity. The likelihood that it will rain is, however, something suggested. The pedestrian feels the cold. He thinks of clouds and coming shower. So simple observation, he's saying, is not really thinking. Real thinking includes coming up with these conclusions, right? Getting back to this notion of reflection. So dullards don't really think. They simply observe, right? Thinking involves a noted or perceived fact, followed by something else which is not observed, but is brought to mind, suggested by the thing seen. Right? Real thinking, according to Dewey, is not simply observations about the world around you, but it is something else that you're now engaging in based upon what your perceptions have shown. This function by which one thing signifies or indicates another, and thereby leads us to consider how far one may be regarded as warrant for belief in the other, is then the central factor in all reflective or distinctly intellectual thinking. So intellectual thinking is then drawing the connections between these. Reflection thus implies that something is believed in or disbelieved in, not on its own direct account, but through something else which stands as witness, evidence, proof, voucher, warrant, that is, as a ground of belief. Reflection then has something that you're believing in because of other beliefs. And again, we can see a very strong connection here with what Dewey is advocating and what Peirce's main aim of pragmatism was. We can see that indeed one was the student of the other. Thinking for the purposes of this inquiry is defined accordingly as the operation in which present facts suggest other facts, or truths, in such a way as to induce belief in the later upon the ground or warrant of the former. So, saying this again, thinking is going to be defined as that operation which you're taking in information and then going to make a belief upon it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to assert that this is going to be the case, or that. It's not the walking in the field or even the observation of the clouds, but it's the connection of these. It is going to rain. I better do something to not get rained upon. Another instance, commonplace also, yet not quite so trivial, may enforce this lesson. A man traveling in an unfamiliar region comes to a branching of the roads. Having no sure knowledge to fall back upon, he is brought to a standstill of hesitation and suspense. Which road is right? This is a great allegory for many decisions that we have in life. You don't have a definitive answer that one way is better than the other, but yet you must make a choice. Do you go this way or that? How do you choose? You must make a choice, and this is where we're going to find the realm of reflexive thinking. This is how perplexity can be resolved, because there are but two alternatives. You must either blindly and arbitrarily take your course, trusting to luck for one outcome. I'm just going. I'm not even thinking, right? Then you're not having reflexive thinking if it's just luck. Or you're going to venture to discover grounds for the conclusion that a given road is right. You're going to look for things and say, is this the correct road? You're going to investigate it and see if there is an advantage in going to the road to the right or the left. what signs are going to give you an attempt for that? Any attempt, he says, to decide the matter by thinking will involve inquiry into other facts, whether brought out by memory or by further observation or by both, right? I think I remember somebody said I should always avoid X. Now, what side is that? Or you're going to be studying and investigating this. The perplexed wayfarer must carefully scrutinize what is before him, and he must cudgel his memory. He looks for evidence that will support belief in favor of either of the roads, for evidence that will weigh down one's suggestion. He may climb a tree, he may go first in this direction, then in that, looking in either case for signs and for clues and indications. You might tease out an idea a little bit more. What happens if I go this way? Well, that's going to lead to this. Okay, that's fine. Oh, but that'll lead to that. Wait, that might not be fine. Well, what if I go to the other side? No, the first one might be right. Which way is the right way to go? He wants something in nature as a signboard or a map. You're wanting to look and discover something by investigating it a little bit more, and his reflection aimed at the discovery of facts that will serve this purpose. You want to know that going down the right side is going to lead to danger, if indeed that's what it's going to do. Demand for the solution of a perplexity is the steadying and guiding factor of the entire process of reflection. The problem fixes the end of thought, and the end controls the process of thinking. Our thoughts are fixed on the goal that we want to achieve. This is what reflective thinking does. It's moving your thoughts to what is the goal. Do I want to engage a scary monster, a beast who's part man, part bear, and part pig? Or do I want to get to where I'm going? Which one is the better course of action? Do I hide in fear of what could be intimidating? Or do I go to what's seen as the most direct route? What is the goal? And the goal is then going to dictate what you think about. Now, this is fascinating when we reconnect it with Peirce, right? Peirce believed that concepts are plans of actions or rules for interpreting experience. Dewey is saying that we have this road and we have to make a decision which way we're going to go. Well, our mind works to tell us which way is the right way to go. Pragmatism as a theory is that way of giving you notions of beliefs and habits that are going to be verbalized and make something a valid and living option for you to do and proceed moving forward, to also use arguments from James. But Dewey's main emphasis here is that we look at things through the goals that we want to achieve. The truth is what we think is going to get us to where we're going, and that the goal then influences our decisions, as opposed to Peirce, who says that our experience and language dictates our expectations, which then dictates the coming experience. And so again, different ways of maybe approaching the same question, the same outcome. Was this a good road to go down? Well, I got my goal, so it was. Or I encountered a scary beast. Maybe it wasn't. Well, I should have thought X. I should have interpreted Y. I should have noticed this little thing, a signpost. I should have maybe ventured a little down the road before committing to it. So in summary, we may recapitulate by saying that the origin of thinking is some perplexity, confusion, or doubt. The beginning of thinking is when we don't know, according to Dewey. To turn the thing over in our mind to reflect means to hunt for additional evidence, for new data that will develop the suggestion and will either, as we say, bear it out or else make obvious its absurdity and irrelevance. Reflective thinking, in short, means judgment suspended during the further inquiry, and suspense is likely to be somewhat painful. When we have to stop instead of just act, there's a certain pain involved with that. Because you're uncomfortable. Your truth might not be true. And so, right, that's going to cause you drama. To maintain the state of doubt and to carry on a systematic and protracted inquiry, this is the essential acts of thinking. This is what we need to do to proceed. This is how we're going to understand notions of truth. We have to carry on even though we have to doubt, because that's what thinking is. That's how we move and proceed. Ultimately, what is pragmatism? How do you construct this idea in your mind? In some ways, it's probably easier for you, an American audience, to grasp notions of pragmatism than some of the other trains of thought, because it does have a certain American feel to it. Do you like the arguments of Peirce, James, or Dewey more? Is there a difference between how they construct pragmatism, or how you understand pragmatism from addressing these people? To return to the question asked by Oswald the Leipzig chemist, what difference does one make versus the other? If they don't have a difference, then what does that mean? Can you accept the notion that an idea can be true for today and false tomorrow? Is this how you always live, or is this the worst possible way of living? Questions to think about.